Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? Sean, we might as well jump right into it. I mean, we are now just days away from New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and it's about time to put a damn bow on the year that was. But let's look back, because I mean, we've talked about this on 3 Count Thursday, my wrestling show, a little bit, and it's weird to think about things that happened before the pandemic but still happened in the year 2020. And I even remember, I think it was like in like March or April, I had seen a commercial that had aired during the Super Bowl, and it seemed so strange, looking at something, because the Super Bowl at that point, even at that point, felt like it was so long ago. So like looking at some of the things, some of the best moments sports wise, Sean, from this year, what are some that come to your mind? I mean, for me, I think the first one, it goes all the way back to October, and when Notre Dame beat, or at the beginning of November when Notre Dame beat Clemson. I mean, that's a win. That's a win that Notre Dame doesn't get all the time. That's a win that we've kind of become used to Notre Dame not getting. So like to have that, and as the game itself played out, for Notre Dame to the book fumble, and then you end up going to overtime, and we've seen those sort of scenarios play out so many times over the last 10, 15, 20 years for Notre Dame, and for them to actually get the victory. I mean, the ACC championship kind of soured it a little bit, but you go back to that game in November, and that's an all-time moment for Notre Dame. For me, I mean, that's the first time, because it was 93 was the last time they had beaten a number one team. I was 8 years old at that point. So
yeah, 93. I was Notre Dame, Florida State. It was the only the second time, I think, or something like that. In the because at that point there wasn't a college playoff or a national title game where you really increased the odds of 1-2, and even with just the championship game in recent years, teams were able to opt out of bowl games. Back then you couldn't. So not even just as a regular season game, but just seeing a 1 versus 2, that game in 93 was huge. And it was still a very relevant Notre Dame team, and obviously a Bobby Bowden, Florida State team. So I don't know if the billing for this game was necessarily higher, but it was close. No. And it was because I think it's been so long, not only since Notre Dame had a number one team there, but since Notre Dame was relevant enough for some to think they could beat them. Right. And that was kind of it wasn't just like, oh, let's host a number one and see if we can upset them. It was like we were right up there in the top 5 with them. So that's what made it, I think, a big time game. And then to come out on top. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a huge one.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of some other ones, obviously, you had the Super Bowl, you had LSU winning a national title.
I was going to say LSU. The Super Bowl was a big one for me, just because, for a long time, I was definitely always an Andy Reid supporter in Philadelphia. Kind of ran out of town, and I think over time the city and the area as a whole kind of looked back and appreciated what Andy had done for the franchise. But at the time, it was very much like, this guy can't win any games that matter, and that's not true, because to get to the playoffs and to get where he did get, and then eventually not win one in Philadelphia, but to get to that point year after year, and take a franchise that had been since the Buddy Ryan era had been all but irrelevant, for over a decade, and then to come in and kind of start doing your thing. And was he working with the draft picks of a Ray Rhodes? A lot of folks seem to think that helped, but that's only going to help you for a few years. You know what I mean? And kind of you got to do your thing. And So for him to always be on the cusp of, well, is he a Hall of Fame coach? Is he not? Which I still think was madness. I mean, Super Bowl or not, the guy should have been there. But now he was able to, with one huge win, fully stamp that ticket to Canton. No questions asked.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be a huge gold jacket unless things change. But yeah, I'm hoping. I'm hoping that he has a couple more going his way. Why not this year? We're not going to be there. Let's go do it again. But that was a big memory for me. And as far as sports memories go, I mean, obviously, like you said, they all seem so long ago because there was like that huge gap. And then, obviously, you had the death of Kobe Bryant in there, which as far as sports memories isn't a positive one. It's not a big game or a big win, but it definitely was a clock-stopping moment for the world of sports.
Yeah, that was the last Sunday in the month of January.
Yeah, it was way back at the beginning, and it really it became really important, I think, for the NBA to find a bubble and get things done, because it would have been a shame for not only Kobe to have passed, but then have no one crowned a champion and kind of have basketball stop that year. It would have kind of put a huge damper on the league, and so I thought I remember that being a big one. The canceling of it was big down here because it was scheduled to have to be here in Tampa, the Final Four, the NCAA March Madness getting canceled. And I know the NCAA has done a lot for eligibility and things, but you had a lot of programs. Some were usual programs favored to get there, others not so much. But Gonzaga was on a run that was almost unheard of. Would have been kind of one of the rare chances. Now they've been a 1 seed in recent years, but not every year. But it was they were like a unanimous one. And looking to just tear through and maybe just get themselves a title. And, all those kids, some graduated and chose not to come back. Others are sticking around. But, you had a lot of schools that would have qualified for that tournament or been close and had to just go back to the drawing board. And that's a shame for young kids to have to do that.
Yeah. And I think the big thing that is going to highlight the sports year is things that didn't happen or things that didn't or that happened in months they weren't supposed to. And for me, obviously it's the adjustment of leagues. Baseball shifted, hockey shifted to bubbles, the basketball shifted to bubbles. But the fact that those leagues pulled it off and pulled it off in relatively a quick time. I mean, it felt like a very long time in real, as it played out. But if you really think about it, they went from, we have no idea what's going on, but we have to shut this thing down, to getting back in play in a couple of months' time, and to do it in a safe manner, to do it in a controlled manner. In hockey's case, to do it in another country, is impressive. To get, another country to kind of agree and to allow, travel from, the United States and from other countries around the world to get people into those cities, Edmonton and Toronto, to make it happen. For Major League Baseball to go from the first week of the season having numerous cancellations and breakouts and this and that, and then to finally get it contained and make that season play out. And for the NFL and college football, I mean, college football has been a very strange season. Teams playing only 6 games, 5 games, 4 games. And whatnot, but the fact that we've made it to, we're just days away from the college football playoff semifinals, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But the fact that these leagues and sports made it happen, and I get that, there's a financial aspect to making sure for these leagues and stuff to make sure that they happen, but they did it, and for the most part, it seems like that even the people that did contract the virus, it was relatively they've recovered from it, and that's not a a signal for people to go out and be reckless about things, but they were able to recover. So I think it's just the fact that sports survived and gave people a place to distract themselves for a few hours of time. I mean, I even go back to the golf challenges, the one with Peyton Manning and Tiger Woods and Tom Brady and Phil Mickelson. I mean, obviously I'm a big golfer, but my wife, she's not a big golfer. And we sat and we watched that, for hours because it was entertaining and it was something different. It was something to distract. And that throughout this whole time, I think is something to that is of value.
Well, yeah. And I think that's, when you look back, is going to be the biggest memory of the year in sports. And it's kind of, we talked about, some of the disappointment with the March Madness and obviously, things getting changed and moved, like you said. But the most positive thing was kind of like, sports finding a way and working around, like you said, all those roadblocks and hurdles and just finding a way to, just play ball, just get out there and in one form or another, it's going to look different. It's going to sound different. It's going to be different. But you got a chance to get fans involved. And I think you saw all leagues getting creative with like NBA's fan video walls and with, like you said, the full lockdown in Canada for the NHL with the beautiful setup that those two cities had. And even Major League Baseball getting in on it and really closing down as much as they could. And leagues had their scares and, they found a way to forge through. And I don't know what that looks like going forward as we're looking at vaccines and things like that and what the timing's going to be and who's getting what. But we'll see. But at this point, we've been able to play. And because of that, you were able to see some other ones like Tampa Bay and the Lightning getting over a hump they've been fighting at for several years. Getting LeBron James another title, another step closer to his claim to whatever rank you want to give him in NBA history and all the glory that kind of rains down with him. We just saw some real good. We saw the Dodgers get over their hump too and get one for the first time in a long time. And I think that's a huge win for the world of sports. I hope things are going well for them and sports in general, and hopefully some of the college athletes and the ones that are hoping to get to that rung, that this gap isn't too long, because that would be the big fear for me is there going to be a weird gap here where like collegiate athletes aren't playing or we're not getting an accurate read on like jumping to the next level. Maybe there's no drafts at some point. You just got to hope that it's kind of a 1 year or 2 year and done, and we all move forward. But yeah, there were some somber memories. There were some good memories. But I think all around sports fans will definitely remember this year, and hopefully it worked out for most of us and those that didn't get to see what they wanted to see and didn't get to experience what they wanted to experience. Maybe we can all get to see it in person real soon as we move forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another thing too is I've seen some people try and put like say that that these seasons championships have an asterisk. It's not a real season anyway. Like, no, I think we've covered that before, but like I hammer it home that like if anything, the leagues that went into bubbles and stuff like that, I think that was in some ways harder than a normal year because you're away from your family. You're isolated. It is a completely different environment than you've ever been. Yeah, you don't have the travel, but it's a completely different situation than ever before. And even with like college football now, like, because I've seen people say, well, if Ohio State wins a national, I mean, if Ohio State wins a national title, they're going to beat Clemson and Alabama or Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But like, whether or not they didn't play enough games, that's an argument that we've already had. But like, they're going to prove themselves in the next two games if they were to win if they're to go on and win the national championship. So, because I don't think people doubted that Ohio State was good. I think they just were mad, myself included, about the fact that they kind of, got an easy pass, so to speak, into the college football playoff. But we've been there. But yeah, these teams, these leagues, these players, they absolutely deserve. There's no asterisk on these seasons. The only people that are putting asterisks on seasons are the people whose teams didn't win.
Right, they're sour about it.
And I think
college football, to me, college football may be the closest to one in my heart of hearts, just because of the different conferences jumping in at different times. It wasn't the same jumping off point for everyone.
Sure.
It wasn't the same experience for every conference, every player, every coach. And the fact that some schools and things like that are, making changes in personnel based on, kind of a placing of where teams go, then I think it kind of comes into importance who gets placed where and who goes to what point. Now, do I think a team, somewhere from 6 to 10 that maybe didn't get that last playoff spot, that I still think doesn't belong to Ohio State in my heart of hearts, but it is what it is. I don't think any of them are looking at unloading anyone, but yeah, it just kind of was a strange season for college football, and a lot of kids and a lot of programs not playing. And I don't know, it just it felt closer to me. Now, maybe by the time the playoff shakes out, any of those little almost asterisk feelings I have are gone. But you're still going to have the playoff. You're still going to find, maybe Clemson and Alabama tear through everybody, and it's just the two of them, and one of them wins, and we're like, okay, yeah, we were right from the beginning. We were spot on. And maybe one of the other teams, or maybe both of those teams, lose in the first round, and then you go, hey, wait a minute, guess they didn't mess up after all. You don't know. You just don't know until the game's played, and those kids have still been through a lot. Ohio State, you can talk about the less games, and I'm gonna kind of mock their season, and I have. But truth be told, they almost got eliminated from a Big Ten championship, or Big 12 rather. No, it's Big Ten, just too many teams. I'm talking all kinds of stuff.
There's 12 in the Big Ten, but
it gets confusing. There's a Big 12 with variable teams. There's a Big 10 with 12 teams. There's a Pac-12 that used to be 10. It's madness to me.
I think the Pac-12 has 14 teams now.
Yeah, it's just madness. That's just they just need to call it Pacific.
Right, it's the Pacific Conference.
Yeah, let's just rename the Big 10 and the Big 12.
The Big 10 should be the Midwest Conference, because let's be honest, it's the Midwest Conference.
Great Lakes Conference.
I know they have Maryland and Rutgers, but they don't count anyway.
No, they don't really count unless they're beating Penn State. And then it's fine. But yeah, those players almost missed it and it wasn't even their team. Like, Ohio State didn't have enough cases to cancel any games at any point, really. They had their cases, they locked them down, but it wasn't any more than any of these other schools that are seeing it. They were getting games canceled from other programs. So those kids almost saw it slip through their fingers. So you can't hold the kids accountable. And to be honest, you can't hold the coaches accountable either. It was all at the Big Ten level, and it was a conference choice. So as an asterisk, it's kind of more on the whole picture. The asterisk on the season, in my mind, if there is one, isn't so much with Ohio State as it is with kind of the inability to get everything started from the same springboard. But it was a long season. It was an exciting season. So I'll probably give him a pass and pull my asterisk and just kind of hold it in my pocket.
Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order? Yeah, and we'll predict the games here in a little bit, but I don't think it's going to matter. I feel like the national championship game is a fairly obvious one, and I don't think it involves Ohio State and their asterisk anyway. But before we predict the games, Sean, I'm sitting here and I was watching. ESPN was airing some of their documentaries from the 150th season last year, and one of them was about like the national championship and the BCS and the creation of the college football playoff, and how it's changed from a unanimous national champion back in like the 50s and 60s, and then it became the AP championship, and then in the 90s you saw a few instances of a split, a co-national champion, because the one year was Michigan had to go to the Rose Bowl because at that time the Big Ten champion had to go to the Rose Bowl. Tom Osborne announced he's retiring from Nebraska, and they gave the coaches voted for Nebraska as the coaches national champion. So you had a split national champion there. I think you had another one during the BCS era. And now, we're in what, the 8th, 9th year of the college football playoff, and for the most part, it's been the same dogs. It's been Alabama's always there. Clemson's been there the last few years. Ohio State's been in a majority of them. You get your occasional LSU. Notre Dame's now been in 2. Oklahoma's been in it. Oregon was in one of them. But we're already seeing repetition in the first decade. And like, is it just a product of the state of college football that those couple of teams are always at the top, and until Dabo's not at Clemson and Saban's not at Alabama and Ohio State stops running their factory? Like, is it just a fight for the other spot, or is there a way that the system can be quote unquote fixed? And I think, we've talked about the prospect of a potential 8-team playoff, and to me, I said it when they first announced that they were moving to a 4-team playoff. I'm like, well, you have 5 power conference. I wasn't taking into account the UCFs of the bunch. I wasn't even thinking about it from a Notre Dame aspect, because I figured Notre Dame goes undefeated, there's probably a pretty damn good chance they're going to be one of the top 4. But I'm like, you have 5 power conferences, and I don't think there should be automatic bids. But to me, it already seems flawed if the best team, probably 80% of the time from every conference, doesn't have a shot at the national championship.
Because you figure, let's just say hypothetically that none of those conferences cross-schedule each other. Like, hypothetically, you're in a season where they all play outside, but they play like lesser, and let's say that all 5 have an undefeated team, and it's like, now what? Now you're just weighing schedules against schedules, and you're, is that going to happen? Probably never.
Always going to lose out.
Right.
Because most Pac-12 games are played when people are in bed.
Yeah, well, that doesn't help them. But I think as a committee, I don't know that they necessarily take that into account. But it would always be an argument of, like, if it was the 5, the argument would be, well, are we getting rid of Oklahoma or are we getting rid of Oregon? Like, right. It's going to be like one of those 2 schools, because they want to put the best product out there. And unless somehow those 2 conferences start turning it around and showing us a defensive product, and we've been making fun of that for years, but all of a sudden you have an SEC where teams are scoring 40, 50, 60 points a game.
Right.
It's not a defensive conference. It's an air it out, shoot it, who has the ball last kind of conference, as long as you have 2 comparable programs. The issue in the SEC now, and when I'm just kind of bouncing through the programs here, but one of the issues I said for a long time, and it ties right into the same teams being at the top every year, is I said for the SEC for a long time, and I know I've talked to you about it, is because for the most part, the SEC was scheduling their out-of-conference games for a long time against weaker programs or trying to fill the schedule, because they don't have to schedule a hard game, because everybody assumes that the SEC is the same SEC it's always been, and then you have these powerful teams. And so as long as you get through it unscathed or with 1 loss, you're probably going to be there. And the issue with that is, if the only real programs they're playing are each other, how would you ever possibly recognize if that product falls?
Right.
If for some reason, as an entire conference, the skill level drops just a bit, like down to that upper middle tier or low high tier, the same programs, on par with like a Michigan, or this year, Indiana would kind of fill the Michigan void that we usually see, or, the Oregon, out west, where like, maybe they're a 1-loss team. If everybody in that conference fell to that level and Alabama was still the best one, maybe they're just as good as before, but you're just assuming like, well, they beat LSU and Auburn and Georgia, so they have to. I mean, that's a great schedule. But if all those teams did was play each other, slap each other around, and one of them comes out without a loss, you would never know if most of those teams.
And I mean, we've kind of seen that this year because of the way that COVID's played out. Because
and I'd like to be clear, I'm not saying for sure that my take is that the SEC has fallen in some sort of, in my opinion, have they fallen a little bit? A lot of these big programs, sure. Are there other ones taking their place? Maybe. I haven't seen a large enough slice to guarantee that that's happening. But But it is interesting to think that if you're just holding these higher teams, the Alabamas, the Ohio States, the Clemsons, and you're just saying like, well, somebody beat them and prove us that they don't belong there, you're kind of running into a similar thing where you're like, well, are you really playing anyone? Like let's look at your conferences. Maybe we're wrong here. There's no analysis of, are you the same team you were the last time we had you here? It's just like, well, they're still winning. Must still be going well. You just never know. You're not like, I feel like for some of those teams, they're not really getting the same critical analysis that some other programs are getting. Are they still undefeated and probably belong there? Probably. But I feel like no one's really breaking down Alabama or Clemson's schedule going, because people are tearing Notre Dame out saying they don't belong in the top.
That's one of my issues too, is, people wanted to rip Notre Dame and rip their schedule apart this year. And I wanted to be like
the same conference as Clemson.
Right. It's the same. And that's the thing too, is like, over the last couple years,
one less loss.
The last couple of years, Notre Dame's played 5 ACC games. Everybody wants to talk about how poor their schedule is. I'm like, well, they're playing 5 teams out of a conference. You want them to play conference play. They've been doing it to a degree, but then they also play USC, who's one of usually the better teams out of the Pac-12. You play a Navy team that for the last few years has been pretty damn good. Like they're not going. They've never scheduled a 1AA opponent. That's something that literally only them and UCLA have never played a 1AA opponent in their program's history. So like they're not scheduling, that big of a cupcake, but and then you look at and now this year, that was the funniest part about this year. They finally get into a conference. Everybody's like, well, their schedule is weak. I'm like, so then what has Clemson's excuse been? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Clemson's not a good football team. Obviously, they're a great football team. Alabama's a great football team. But like, to me, when I look at the college football playoff system, like, and don't get me wrong, most years, number 1's probably going to beat number 8, number 2's probably going to beat number 7, but there's plenty of seasons where the team that's number 8 or number 7 is only there because they were number 1 early
and they slipped up,
and they played, it was number 1 Georgia versus number 3 Alabama, and Alabama beat them or something like that. And, you fall to 6 or 7 and you can never just get out of that hole because teams above them have a chance to win. So why not give that number 6, number 7 team that only lost to the number 2 team in the country another opportunity?
Right. Give a team like A&M that didn't get a conference championship to boost their resume, that like maybe wants to prove that they belong there, like put them in there. But I mean, we touched on it the other week. I'm not going to go too far, but I think you're also going to see like people that want to see the Cincinnatis and the whatever. I said, I was talking about how the committee has them where they have them to say like, hey, we recognize you, but we don't really think you'd win.
Yeah.
And I said, like, if they go to 8 teams, there's a good chance you're going to see those like people like, yeah, get it to 8 so those teams have a chance. And I really think you're going to kind of see a shift where all of a sudden that 6, 7 cute spot for those like fun teams is now going to be like 9 or 10. And it's just a take that I have, and maybe it proves me wrong if they do ever expand it. But I just see, they're still going to want to create what they feel are legitimate games, and maybe that type of team is what that 8 seed is for. And you say, we want to give that semi-Cinderella team a chance to beat an Alabama or a Clemson or whoever's sitting on top. And I think that's probably what you should do. But they may still be like, yeah, but that second SEC team or, that second Big Ten team that only has 1 loss would be really interesting to match up against a 1.
Well, what you need to happen is the other year UCF, they beat Auburn in their bowl game. This week, and we're going to predict the games here in a second, but you have Cincinnati taking on Georgia. You need, if you want the playoff to expand, you need Cincinnati to win that game, or at least be competitive. Because if they're not, every time that a UCF, a Cincinnati, a Tulsa, a Boise State, and any not a Utah, they're in the Pac-12 now, but anytime those group of 5 teams have an opportunity to play a top 10 opponent, if they get whitewashed, if they get destroyed, that hurts all of those arguments. and not even necessarily.
I just had an interesting idea, and I'm going to have to send it to my friends at the NCAA headquarters. We're real tight.
Listening anyway.
Yeah, we're real. I mean, they're probably on the wire here, on the line, just listening on the line. I hear this goes out on the line, but we. So you take those smaller conferences, like you have your Power Five. You take the four that always feel slighted, your UCFs, your Cincinnati's, your whoever. How many conferences do you think that is? 4? Are there 4 conferences that never have a
Power 5 and Group of 5? So I think it's 5. I think it's the other 5.
I don't know how you do it with 5. Let's pretend it was 4 just to get my opinion out there. And then later at another show, we'll work out the logistics on it. But we're essentially, if you win your conference, instead of simply going to a conference game, whatever, there's already a gap between your playoff anyway. Just make another week. You know, you have your 8 teams, but only the top 6 are locked in. And your last 2 spots are play-in games for those other conferences, where they may have to do a little mini 2-round tournament or something like that. Maybe you only pick 2. Maybe you go like 7 through 10, whoever they are, do a 4-team play-in to be 7 and 8, something like that. It buys you an extra couple games of football. It buys you 9 and 10 an opportunity to be there. And 10's a nice round number. Finds you a way to get past that, Elite 8, kind of get a play-in game, because they did it to college basketball. They added 60 with up to like 68 teams.
Now, yeah.
You know, nobody even notices that there's more teams. They're like, this is great.
Yeah, it's
now
just,
I can
it's
take
just
off work on
yeah.
Wednesday afternoon too, you know. But it might be an interesting play. Kind of make sure that somebody from those conferences, as long as they're over 500, as long as, you know, and maybe they have to be ranked. I don't know what the cutoff is there. But whether it's a conference play-in to guarantee those conferences a chance, maybe it's a play-in to get 1 spot. And you don't know which spot it is, but you will be guaranteed a spot in the final playoff if, like, you win that bracket. And it kind of give those smaller conferences a chance to play through, and maybe it's the 5+1, like an honorable team kind of gets in as a 6th team. And I don't know what the logistics are of playing that many extra games, but I know that Vegas would love it. And I don't know, just an idea.
Yeah, I'm not just advocating a change because I'd like to see a team like Notre Dame have an opportunity to play Texas A&M before they have to play Clemson or Alabama again. I'm just saying 8 teams gives, I think, more. I think it gives everybody more of an opportunity because, like I said, there shouldn't be an automatic bid because you will have those years where the, ACC champion is the 14th team in the country. They shouldn't be playing for a play. But more times than not, your conference champion will be in the top 8 for all 5 Power 5 schools. Then you'll get some at-larges, your Notre Dames, your Texas A&Ms this year, and then you're also going to have your Cincinnati or your UCF, when they go through a season unscathed. So I think
whatever it is, I think the expansion's good, and I think if we're talking about is there an issue with those schools being up there, I don't know. I think it's like a red flag. I think it's definitely something to look at. But you could also break down all the history of the bowl games before it was a title game. When you look at the big 4 bowls: Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, and look at over the course of any given 10-year span, I'd be willing to bet if you looked at those 4 games that probably like 4 to 5 of the 8 are very similar for most of the years. So I don't know that it's necessarily a trend now. I think it is a trend in college football to believe that if a team won the year before, whether their program was dismantled or not, it's kind of this belief in like a coach or a program to just automatically have a good product. And then that one year that they don't, and they get teetered out of there and fall off the face of the planet, is usually the time for. But that's usually when the coach starts working his way out and moving on. Whether it was Carroll falling out and then going miraculously right before the NCAA showed up with an investigation. It's strange, right? But you saw with Bobby Bowden, you saw it happens. The coaches are about to go on their way out, and whether or not they're letting players know that, or you're not recruiting as hard because of it, things topple a little before you go, and you wind up kind of not there. So, until you break that rock, I don't see any reason I mean, Alabama hasn't shown me any reason why they don't belong up there every year. So at this point, we'll just kind of ride with it. But yeah, there's definitely a red flag, and I think if you expand it, maybe that red flag breaks itself open a little bit.
Huddle Up Podcast is sponsored by Arena Eats. Log on to the website arenaeats.app, that's arenaeats.app, for the ultimate fan experience. At your favorite sports venue, Arena Eats mobile app, pre-order, express pickup, and in-seat delivery. How do you place your order?